So what are stabilization wedges?
Stabilization wedges, or wedges, are a measurement tool that show the cuts that we could make to dramatically change the emissions to stop the imminent climate change that is going to happen if we don't take action. One wedge represents 1 billion tons of carbon.
Oh.
So if we keep emissions at a stable level for the next 50 years, we will be able to defend against global warming and reduce the possible amount of carbon dioxide emissions released into the atmosphere to help mitigate the greenhouse effect. So our first wedge was increased transport efficiency. So you might be asking yourself what this might entail for the general public. Well, this means that we're going to double the current car gas efficiency. The average right now is 30 miles per gallon, and as you might have guessed, it would become 60 miles per gallon. One challenge that you might expect to run into if we do use this as a wedge is that car size and power would be severely affected in a negative way, but we can use alternative materials and other engine types to help to bridge this impact.
This wedge has the potential to cut carbon emissions in half. Just 25% of the emissions will allow for an entire wedge to be removed. This wedge would result in putting in more insulation and alternative types of furnaces and lighting, which will increase efficiencies. For a small cost, you would be sacrificing house size, which is something that people can't handle giving up. The general population needs to realize that if we have no arable land left, the greenhouse effect is melting polar ice caps won't matter if they have a house because they'll be dead. Little things add up, and unfortunately for any prima donnas out there, this means sacrificing a small amount of gluttony for the greater good.
If we get people to stop traveling as much as we normally do, then we can effectively cut the miles traveled by all passenger vehicles in half. If we increase the use of things like buses and other large vehicles that can transport large amounts of people, then we can give an alternative to using your own car to bring 1 to 4 people to the same place that a lot of other people will be going as well.
The fourth wedge that we were doing is fuel switching. The lower carbon content of natural gas means that we can effectively halve the emissions of coal by switching to gasoline. This would mean that we would have to have 1,400 large natural gas plants to replace the coal plants that were there previously. The only downfall of this is that natural gas availability will become a challenge at this large of a project. However, it is low cost. The only issue is getting a hold of the commodity.
The fifth wedge that we chose was increased efficiency of electricity production. It is said that coal-burning power plants produce a large amount of the world's carbon emissions. If we increase efficiency in the parts that comprise the coal-burning plants through things like better turbines, using high-temperature fuel cells, and combining fuel cells and turbines, we can also improve the system by using more efficient distribution of electricity demand. The problem with this is that it's a little bit high cost, but it's worth it in the end because we're only saving ourselves.
The sixth wedge that we did was nuclear electricity. Nuclear plants have the potential to cut the amount of carbon emissions released through your ordinary electricity production using coal. The only downfall of this would be nuclear proliferation and nuclear waste, which if we continue working at the concept, we can eliminate this as an issue. If we put these plants downwind from towns, we won't have to deal with local opposition, and nuclear plants can work without much trouble.
The seventh wedge that we did was solar electricity. What are called photovoltaic cells convert sunlight to electricity. The arrays would require approximately 20,000 kilometers squared. The arrays could be found on roofs and walls of buildings, or we could use dedicated land. There's only 2 problems with this source of energy, and they are price and the fact that this can only work at night. The price will decline as we increase the use because of supply and demand. As more people demand it, more companies will rise up to create more supply for the general public, which will cause the price to go down.
The eighth wedge that we did was biofuels. Plants use carbon dioxide to create their nutrients. Corn and sugarcane, being the main producers of ethanol, are going to be the target of choice. Current ethanol production programs in the United States and Brazil only come up with 20 billion gallons. In order to make this sustainable, we would need to have 12 times what we have now. We can use bioengineering to make the plant production much more efficient and create a biofuel farm. The general population, we believe, will like our decision to do this because it is keeping them alive. Taxpayers and consumers will get a 3 because it is slightly expensive, but it's the cheapest path you could take to reduce emissions. Energy companies will not like our plan because it costs them the most money to convert, so we gave them a 1. Environmental groups are going to like it because it reduces emissions a lot, but there's one downfall with nuclear waste and proliferation, so we gave them a 4. Manufacturers will love this idea because they will have a lot of work to do and plenty of money, so we gave them a 5. Industrialized country governments will like this idea because it will allow for a reduction in carbon emissions at a small cost, while developing country governments will not like it because it costs too much.
We feel that our wedges are better than other people's because it works out best for the environment with minimal cost to us. The only issues with our wedges can be solved over the course of time through research and other engineering techniques. We can destroy any nuclear proliferation that might come of the nuclear plants that we produce. So to recap, we have wedge 1 being increased transport efficiency, wedge 2 being increasing building efficiency, wedge 3 reducing miles traveled, wedge 4 fuel switching, wedge 5 increased efficiency of electricity production, wedge 6 nuclear electricity, wedge 7 solar electricity, and finally wedge 8 being biofuels. With these solutions, we can effectively reduce the carbon emissions and save the world.